3 weeks ago, we talked about Jesus retreating to the wilderness, to a place where he was met with God's love and care and calling to the work of liberating love and justice. 2 weeks ago, we talked about the liberation of our imaginations to see how Spirit calls us to the liberating love and justice that empire tells us is impossible. Last week, we anchored ourselves in the truth that there is enough, even for your own precious soul to be deeply and lavishly nourished. God's love is for all. God's love is for liberation. God is with the marginalized. God is with neighbors experiencing poverty. God is with neighbors who are oppressed by empire. God's love is for you. It is for you. This week, I want us to look at the miracle Jesus facilitated. And I use the word facilitated because it is my personal conviction that this was not a magical story of some never-ending food akin to an everlasting gobstopper. My personal conviction is that with nearly all the people from surrounding villages coming to see Jesus, there were diverse socioeconomic locations. Some had no food and some had much food. And the true miracle wasn't the multiplication of food, but the multiplication of soul. When Jesus gives thanks to God and not to empire for the food, he reminds everyone gathered that every good and perfect gift comes from above, not from Amazon guaranteed 2-day delivery, not from a stimulus check, from Creator who loves all and is with all and is for all. When Jesus gives thanks to God and not to empire for the food, he hearkens their imaginations to the story of manna. The people found themselves liberated from the empire of Egypt, but they found themselves at a loss of imagination as to where nourishment would come from. They could not see how this liberated way of being would provide for their concrete needs beyond the empire. So God sent manna. The king, and more importantly, the kin of all creation, provided nourishment beyond the confined imaginations of empire for all. When Jesus gives thanks to God and not to empire for the food, he hearkens their imaginations to the story of manna, which was a miraculous but also strict gift. Take what you need, no more. If you have accumulated more than what you need, give it to someone else. It cannot be stored or hoarded. If anyone gathered more manna than they needed, it would rot overnight. Sometimes I think this is the only way we could ever learn to share, if more than what we actually needed would simply disappear or rot overnight. Sometimes I'm a real cynic. And sometimes Spirit reminds me of the feeding of the 5,000, and I can push past that cynicism. Jesus reminds them of manna, the nourishment that is a gift of God that is meant to be shared equally. And when we share, everyone has exactly what they need. And so my personal conviction is that the way this story unfolds is that each person looked around them. They examined what they had and they examined what neighbors needed and they shared what they could. That's a miracle. If scholars are correct, this would have been almost everyone from neighboring villages. This is an entire socioeconomic ecosystem coming together. And when everyone shares, everyone's need is met. Someone probably had a lot to share. Some probably had very little to share. And I imagine someone had something that was almost nothing, but a very tasty nothing. So they received a bite of bread, but also shared some homemade spice to enrich even the meals of their richer siblings. In this wilderness season, our invitation is to remember manna. Remember that true nourishment, food, spiritual nourishment, housing, health, healthcare, anything that nourishes comes from God alone, not from empire. Empire might sell it, but God gives it and gives it to be shared. In this wilderness season, our invitation is to remember manna. Remember that enough is given. If we have more than enough, then it was given to us to share. If we have more than enough soul, it was given to us to share. If we have more than enough understanding of steps towards dismantling racism, that was given to us to share. If we have more than enough knowledge and ability to engage ecological justice, that is given to share. If we have more than enough relational connections, it is given to us to share. If we have more than enough hope, that hope is given to us to share. If we have more than enough spaces for our voice to be heard in this white supremacist world, the mic is given to us to share, to amplify other voices that we all need to hear. If we have more than enough liberation from addiction, it is given to us to share liberation from addiction. If we have more than enough physical ability, it is given to us to share our physical ability. If we have more than enough of the wisdom and compassion that comes from lacking physical ability, that wisdom and compassion is given to us to share. Anything we can imagine that we have plenty of, anything is meant to be shared. And so maybe the real miracle of this story is everyone turning their minds from the question of what is mine to what does my neighbor need. Maybe that is the miracle. In this wilderness season, we have a unique opportunity to listen very deeply to the needs of our neighbors, locally, nationally, globally. We have a unique opportunity to listen very deeply to the needs of all that God has made, the human world and the non-human world. And then to engage in the everyday miracle of sharing. As with last week, I'd like to invite us again to a time of reflection. There will be a YouTube music video for contemplation following this in the playlist for those for whom music is helpful. If silence is better for you, you can skip this or you can mute it if you are joining us on Zoom. If you are watching this on your own time, you can set aside the playlist for a bit and go for a walk or dance or do some gardening or cooking, whatever it is that aids you in settling into contemplation. Today, I'd like to invite us to settle into a radical sense of unity and mutuality, of care with our neighbors. Breathe deeply and take in the world around you, your family, your neighbors, our church family, our church neighborhood, the city of Seattle, our nation, our world, creation's groaning. Breathe in the world and let her speak to you of her needs. And then let Spirit sit down next to you in that contemplation. Let them point out to you how you can share. Share your time, your thoughts, your resources, your voice, your listening ears, your capacity for soul work that grows into liberation work. Let her point out to you how you can share yourself to meet the needs of this world. You can comment in the chat on Zoom or in the video or email me what Spirit is telling you about what the world around you needs and how we can share. You can email to me at pastor@welcometablecc.org, or you can text members of our family of faith, or again, should you have the survey in your inbox, there are questions in the survey in the inbox about what we feel the world around us needs and how we are empowered to meet those needs. May you find a spacious place of discernment in this space. Amen.